Caribbean Sea, this our native land, we pledge our lives to thee. Here every creed and race find an equal place, and may God bless our nation. Here every creed and race find an equal place, and may God bless our nation. Thank you.
So good day, folks. My name is Risa Thomas, and I am a Standards Officer in the Implementation Division, and I will be your chairperson for this meeting. So welcome. Welcome also to the online participants. We are on the Zoom platform, YouTube, and Facebook. Before we start, let me mention a few house rules. There are no planned drills today. If the alarm sounds, please follow the usher through the marked exits to the muster point. The muster point is located outside to the left of the building. There, we will be further directed by the safety wardens. The washrooms are located opposite the registration area on entry. There is no eating in the auditorium, and also please put all cell phones on mute. The question and answer session will be conducted at the end, and we welcome you to pose your question to the two mics that will be around, and for those online, your questions will also be addressed at the end. So let me begin with the more formal part of the proceedings. Members of the various ministries represented here today, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, the Ministry of Public Utilities, Ministry of Planning and Development, members of the United Nations Development Program, members of the Special Interest Groups, Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association, Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Commerce, specially invited guests, members of the media, and fellow staff of Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards, welcome again. I would like to begin by introducing to you the Executive Director of the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards, Mr. Jose Eduardo Trejo. He's a Brazilian national that has spent the last 22 years as a public officer serving the people of Belize. Prior to joining the service, he worked at the Central Bank of Belize as an economist, having direct responsibility for the compilation of Belize balance of payments statistics. Throughout his career, he has worked with several government ministries. These include the Ministry of Natural Resources and the Environment, Trade, Commerce and Industry, Finance, Economic Development, and most recently, Agriculture, Food Security and Enterprise. During the period 2015 to 2017, he served as the chairman and coordinator of the CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality, headquartered in Barbados, and the Sub-Regional Central American CAMET grouping of the Inter-American Metrology System, respectively. Mr. Trejo previously served as the director of the Belize Bureau of Standards during the period 2007 to 2023. In February of 2023, he assumed duty as the Executive Director at the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards. Let's welcome to the podium, Mr. Eduardo Trejo.
Thank you, Risa, for that kind introduction. A pleasant good morning to everyone. I don't know, but every time I hear a national anthem, whether it's mine or from another country, it gives me goosebumps. Your anthem, if I can quote, says, "May every creed and race find an equal place." I've been here for a year. I am from Belize, but I certainly feel quite at home in Trinidad. So let me just start by welcoming you, ladies and gentlemen, our esteemed stakeholders and distinguished guests. A pleasant good morning to everyone here today. I am pleased to welcome you to this critical national stakeholder consultation on the compulsory standard for compact fluorescent lamps and light emitting diode lamps, CFLs and LEDs, we know them by the acronyms. A heartfelt thank you to everyone joining us today, from manufacturers, importers, and distributors. Who are the manufacturers joining us with us today? If you can raise your hands just briefly. Exporters? And the distributors? Today we're diving into the nitty-gritty of the compulsory standard, but more importantly, we intend to address the compliance framework. I don't like the word enforcement, so I prefer compliance. So we plan to put into action a compliance program, and I hope that at the end of the day, you will have a fair understanding of what the framework would look like. So allow me to provide a brief overview of the National Compulsory Standard TTCS 11-2021, energy labeling compact fluorescent lamps and light emitting diode lamps. This standard specifies the relevant test methods or general labeling requirements, energy labeling requirements, and safety and performance requirements for CFL and LED products. This standard outlines the compulsory requirements for CFLs and LEDs, as well as the mechanisms to demonstrate compliance to these requirements and measures to be taken in the event of non-compliance. The enforcement of TTCS 11-2021 is part of TTBS's strategic plan, specifically under our national standardization strategy. As the national standards body, our role and function is crystal clear under the Standards Act of number 18 of 1997, which is to protect public or industrial health, welfare, and safety. With the growing awareness of the importance of energy efficiency and renewable energy adoption, coupled with consumers' increasing demand for reliable and eco-friendly products, the need for compliance to standards has never been more apparent. Through nationwide surveys undertaken by surveillance and special projects, or special projects units of the implementation division, our inspectors have observed that there are fewer incandescent bulbs on the market, as most consumers are now favoring energy-efficient options. CFL and LED lamps are much more energy efficient than incandescent lamps. They require significantly less electricity to produce the same amount of light, which translates to lower energy bills. CFLs use about 75% less energy, while LEDs use about 75% to 80% less energy compared to incandescent bulbs. Additionally, CFL and LED lamps have much longer lifespans than incandescent lamps, which means fewer replacements over time. Although I have to dispute that. In my country, where they claim that they have LEDs, these LEDs don't last. So it speaks to the importance of a testing framework and the need for a rigid testing framework. Consumers want products that deliver on their promises, and rightly so. There's therefore a greater need for regulation and to minimum requirements of TTCS 11-2021. Through the standard, consumers will have access to consistent and transparent information, simplifying the process of making informed and energy-efficient purchases and choices. The recent closure of the Quality for Sustainable Energy in the Caribbean, QSEC for short, underscored the necessity for improved labeling practices and product performance in our CFL and LED markets. While delivering the keynote address, the Honorable Paul Gopiskun, Minister of Trade and Industry, highlighted the fact that after TTBS conducted labeling tests on some local CFL and LED samples, there was some deficiencies in labeling practices in accordance to the standard. TTBS is therefore working to address and overcome these challenges through greater collaboration with you to create more resilient and sustainable energy environment locally. TTBS will enforce the national standard TTCS 1121 for CFLs and LEDs, or let me say ensure compliance, since I said I don't like the word enforcement, using our testing, using our capabilities here at our lab to test all models of bulbs on sale in the local market for compliance. This will reduce the supply of substandard and non-conforming products on the market. As a standard practice, imported shipments of CFLs and LEDs will be subject to inspection, sampling, and testing to determine conformance for the requirements of the standard. Once all results are satisfactory, goods will be released for sale or distribution. By enforcing the national standard, TTCS 11-2021 and implementing rigorous testing procedures, we aim to eliminate substandard products or inferior products from our markets, ensuring a safer and more sustainable future for all. In conclusion, TTBS is committed to promoting and enforcing standards that ensure the safety and quality of products in our nation. So I encourage all the stakeholders here today to actively participate in this consultation, provide your valuable feedback, and collaborate with us to achieve our shared goals as we continue building a society that is built on standards and quality. So I thank you for your dedication and for your presence here today, and your partnership most importantly, as we embark on this journey together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trehu. Unfortunately, our director, as well as Mr. Jared Maxwell, will not be here for the entire event or program. They will be leaving soon. Mr. Maxwell will be back, though, to speak on the enforcement regime a little later on. Next on the agenda, we have Ms. Kimberly Badlu. Ms. Kimberly Badlu has functioned as a standards officer in the standardization division of TTBS for 11 years. Her focus is primarily on the development of national standards for electrical codes and products, including lighting products and energy efficiency. She graduated from the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at the University of the West Indies in 2011 with honors. She worked as the electrical engineering consultant at Lee Young and Partners, and she's the technical secretary to many committees, including the National Technical Committee for Electrical Codes, the committee responsible for the revision of the low voltage electrical wiring code. Ms. Badlu.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Risa. So I'd just like to welcome everyone again to today's consultation. The crux of my presentation will be an overview of the TTCS 11-2021, which is the energy labeling of compact fluorescent lamps and light-emitting diode lamps compulsory requirements. It's a mouthful. I will further refer to it as CFLs and LEDs. So the mandate of the TTBS is that the Bureau shall promote and encourage the development of standards, and further shall establish standards for the improvement of goods produced or used in TNT, to ensure industrial efficiency and development, to promote public and industrial welfare, health and safety, as well as the protection of the environment. The exceptions being that we do not produce standards for food, drugs, and cosmetics, as this is under the Chemistry, Food and Drugs Division of the Ministry of Health. You'll have to forgive me, I have the Sahara cough, as everybody may have it. So what is a standard? A standard is a document containing technical specs or other criteria to be used repeatedly as guidelines or rules and definitions, or definitions of characteristics to ensure that materials or products meet a certain criteria, a certain standard, per se. There are two types of standards. There are voluntary standards and there are compulsory standards. Voluntary standards are for use by industry players. They're also used for third-party certification. For example, TTCS ISO 45001, which is our Occupational Health and Safety Management System requirements. It can also be used as a compulsory standard when it's incorporated into the regulatory schemes of other state agencies. So a good example of this is the wiring code, as I'm sure everybody here is familiar with. It's incorporated into the GEI's legislation, and in order to pass your house inspection or any electrical installation, everyone has to comply with those requirements, which essentially makes it compulsory. So compulsory standards, according to TTBS, are documents declared by the TTBS as national standards, which have also been accorded compulsory status by the Minister of Trade. The criteria for these standards include to protect the consumer or user against danger to health and safety, protect public or industrial health, welfare, and safety, protect the environment, or to ensure acceptable quality in products, whether produced for home use or for export. So the development of a standard starts with a need. A need has to be identified. We're not just going to put out standards that nobody's going to use. So the idea is there's a need to be identified. Anyone here can send in a stakeholder request form for a standard to be developed with the relevant information according to that form. TTBS will then collect the technical and trade data and prepare a first draft of the standard. We then have a committee, any type of spec committee. It could be an advisory committee, it could be a specification committee, it could be a national technical committee. We usually use those national technical committees for ongoing standards, such as the electrical codes, as I previously mentioned, were developed by the National Technical Committee for Electrical Codes. And then after the committee is going through these standards and coming up with the final draft, it's advertised for public comment for at least 60 days. So everyone, the public and whoever was not on the committee, would have an opportunity to review the standard and submit any comments you may have. So your opinions and your choice and your voice will be heard at some point in this process. If any comments are received, they are discussed and included in the final draft. The final draft is then submitted to the board, and if it's a voluntary standard and the board declares the standard, it is published. If it's a compulsory standard, it has an extra step. It has to go to the ministry in order to process the compulsory standards order, and then the compulsory standard is published. And it's implemented in TTBS. We have a similar consultation to something like this, and it's revised periodically. 3 to 5 years is the standard revision period. So based on the title of my presentation officially begins here. The overview of TTCS 11-2021. What is the standard? So first of all, this is a national adoption of a regional standard. So we are using the regionally developed standard as our basis for this standard. It's intended to be used together with that standard. CRS 58 2018 Energy Labeling, CFLs and LEDs requirements. This was issued by CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality, CROSQ, in November of 2018. So who is responsible for the development? As I spoke to earlier, there are different types of committees. The committee we used for this development would have been the Advisory Committee for Energy Labeling. As it's a compulsory standard, it comprised the internal committee, including the Conformity Assessment Division. So that would be the Implementation Division, the Certification Division, our Lab Services Division, and Standardization Division. The contents of TTCS 11 are as follows. There's a scope, there are normative references, terms and definitions, the requirements, mechanisms to demonstrate compliance, and measures related to non-compliance. So the scope of this standard. This standard specifies the relevant test methods, general labeling requirements, energy labeling requirements, and the safety and performance requirements for CFLs and LED lamps in the specified power ratings below. The normative references include the cross-Q standard previously mentioned and several IEC standards that you'll see listed below. Oh, this presentation can be made available after, so if anybody is interested in the details, we can upload it to the website. So the terms and definitions of the CRS apply for this standard. So there are no terms and definitions within this standard. It's all located in the CRS standard. Clause 4 is for requirements, and this specifies the minimum energy performance standards. The energy labeling requirements for CFLs and LEDs shall comply with the following test methods and limits specified in CRS 58. So the general requirements for the following parameters: efficacy, safety, CRI, power factor, harmonic distortion, lumen maintenance, startup time, run-up time, switching cycles, premature failure rates, and rated life shall be in accordance with the CRS values specified there. Also, the energy labeling requirements, the CFLs and LEDs shall comply for the following energy labeling requirements: the rated wattage, the efficacy, light output, and the rated life. So all of these are in alignment with the cross-Q CRS 58 standard. The additional labeling requirements that are necessary, because as the scope said, the labeling requirements are also included in this document. The CFLs and LEDs shall also have the mark of manufacturer, the country of origin, the rated voltage, the light color, the color temperature, which shall be in accordance with the IEC 62612, which is one of the reference documents. The CRI, cap type, frequency, indication of dimmability where applicable, and indication of whether the CFL or LED is rated for use in an enclosure. So the mechanisms to demonstrate compliance are as follows. CFLs and LEDs shall be subject to a conformity assessment program administered by TTBS through inspection, testing, certification, or a combination of all activities. TTBS will be developing an energy labeling scheme which would include inspection, testing, and market surveillance related to these products, and may include assessments of the production, process, or quality management system as necessary. TTBS may consider and accept information from other sources such as third-party testing, product certification, and/or a quality management system certification from an accredited body. So these are the measures related to non-compliance. If your product is not compliant with our requirements, TTBS can initiate any of the following actions. TTBS can direct the manufacturer, importer, distributor to remove the non-conforming CFLs and LEDs. They can seize and detain within the legal framework specified under the Standards Act. We can prohibit the sale and distribution of non-compliant products. We can permit modifications as necessary where applicable. And we can direct the manufacturer, importer, or distributor to initiate a product recall. So how do you obtain this standard? Well, good news for you, this standard is free. All our compulsory standards of this nature are free and available for download on the TTBS website. Go ttbs.com/shop. However, you will need the CRS reference document, which is also sold on our shop online. So you can call the Standards Information Center, TTBS, for information, or you could email them at ttbs@ttbs.org.tt. So if you have any information, feel free to call, email, somebody will get back to you, and you can get copies of these important documents. So that's it for me, and I'll pass it back to Risa. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly, for that overview. Up next is Mr. Dudnath Singh. Mr. Dudnath Singh is a standards officer at TTBS. He brings a wealth of expertise and experience in the fields of electrical engineering, laboratory management, and quality assurance. He currently holds a Bachelor of Applied Sciences in Utilities Engineering honors, specializing in electrical engineering, a diploma in electrical and electronic engineering technology, and certificates in project management with distinction. In his role at TTBS, Mr. Singh has been instrumental in managing operational activities within the electrical products and energy efficiency lighting laboratories. He has also conducted extensive research and development in new testing areas within the laboratories, ensuring that TTBS remains at the forefront of innovation and technological advancement in electrical testing and quality assurance. The podium is yours, Mr. Dudnath Singh. Where's the gentleman? Okay, I need to get view here.
Come on.
Yeah, I think we're not seeing presenters mode. It's supposed to be. Okay, we need.
I'll use it like this.
We can manage.
I just know we need to just put a view and pose, but it's just not coming up.
And start it back.
Yeah, and it's not coming up. Usually, put it on here, right?
Right.
Hi, good morning all. My name is Dudnath Singh. I'm the officer in charge of the Energy Efficiency Lighting Laboratory. This morning I'll just give a brief presentation in terms of the background, the overview, and the testing capabilities of the Energy Efficiency Lighting Laboratory. So just a brief background in terms of the development of the laboratory. So the Energy Efficiency Lighting Laboratory came into existence as part of a CARICOM project R3E, strengthening of regional quality infrastructure in the Caribbean in the areas of energy efficiency and renewable energy as a center of excellence for lighting products. And this lab was developed to conduct testing both nationally and for the region, for the wider CARICOM countries. An overview of the lab: the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards in March of 2020 acquired a 2-meter integrating sphere system as part of its development process for testing in the area of energy efficiency for performance of CFLs and LEDs lighting products. So this piece of equipment is a fully automated system and will perform the testing for both electrical and photometric parameters of the LEDs and CFL lamps. Just a brief timeline of the events in terms of the development of the lab. So in August of 2018, a 1-week training at Labello in Brazil was conducted for the performance testing of CFLs and LED lighting products. In August of 2020, the laboratory was commissioned and audited by Intertech Energy Star, and this audit was deemed successful. Between January 2021 and December of 2023, we conducted in-country testing of 24 samples of LED lamps and tested 2 samples of CFL lamps. In October of 2023 to December of 2023, we conducted regional testing of 4 samples of LEDs and 1 sample of CFLs between Jamaica and Barbados. In June of 2022 to May 2023, we conducted 2 cycles of interlab comparison for CFLs and LEDs with VD Institute in Germany. And this interlab comparison was to compare our test results to an accredited lab to make sure that our testing capabilities are on par and that we have the proper competence to conduct the testing of CFLs and LEDs. And these 2 interlab comparisons were successful. In March to April of 2023, a 2-week training at Labello was conducted for the safety and performance testing of CFLs and LED lighting products. July of 2023, TTBS Energy Efficiency Lighting Laboratory conducted its first audit by A2LA to attain accreditation status for CFLs and LED lamps. February of 2024, we conducted our annual interlab comparison again for our CFLs and LED lighting products with VD Institute, and we came out successful again. TTBS Energy Efficiency Lighting Laboratory conducted its reassessment audit by A2LA, and we were reaffirmed with our accreditation status for both CFLs and LED lighting products. So based on the lighting laboratory, we have implemented 2 performance standards and 2 labeling standards for testing of CFLs and LEDs. For CFL testing, we use the IEC 60969, and for LED lamps, we use IEC 62612. And we also use our TCCS 11 labeling standard, as well as the CRS 58, which is the CARICOM regional standard for labeling. The aforementioned IEC standards will cover performance testing mainly for electrical and luminous characteristics of the lighting products. So within the laboratory, these are our testing requirements and parameters that we test to. For example, the electrical parameters, we test voltage, current, frequency, power factor, accuracy, and this is for both the CFL and LED performance standard. For the photometric parameters, we test the color temperature, chromacity coordinates, color rendering index, as well as the initial luminous flux, as to the IEC standards as well. Now, for the sample size of these lighting products required by the IEC 62612 for LED lamps, the sample size is 20 lamps, which consist of a batch for testing. And for the IEC 60969 for LED lamps, 10 lamps is considered 1 batch for submission for testing. Note that each batch shall be of the same type, model, brand, wattage, voltage, and frequency for submission to the testing laboratory. The duration of testing. So the duration of testing for LED lamps extends to 3 working days. The duration of testing for CFL lamps extends to 6 working days. Test report takes 1 working day to be issued, inclusive of the testing time. Costing for the testing of the CFL and LED lamps is based on electric and photometric parameters. So our sample size, in terms of 20 lamps or LEDs, the cost for testing is $3,000 TT dollars, and for CFL lamps with a sample size of 10 is $3,500. Only CFL lamps require aging or preconditioning. This entails that the lamps be energized for 100 hours at 4.5 days before commencement of test. So that's why the duration for CFL lamps will be longer than LED lamps. So the services that we provide at the Energy Efficiency Lighting Laboratory will continue its testing services at a national level through our conformity assessment activities. TTBS has extended its services to our CARICOM member states counterparts and will continue to provide assistance in supporting our mandate to our clients. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. So thank you very much. If you need additional information, you could contact me at my email address, and we can liaise further in terms of your testing requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Now, the next presenter is Dr. Wendell Richards, and he is in Jamaica at this time. And for those who would like to know the requirements to ship to Jamaica, this would be the person that you should listen to. Dr. Wendell Richards is employed at the BSJ NCRA, which is the Bureau of Standards Jamaica, National Compliance and Regulatory Authority, for the past 18 years, where he has managed the Standards Compliance Department in the Regulatory Division and the National Compliance and Regulatory Authority for 14 years. Now, this department comprises the following units: the Appliance Unit, Construction Unit, Non-Metallic Unit, and the Prepackaged Goods Unit. His responsibilities include managing the Standards Compliance Monitoring Program, where locally manufactured and imported products are regulated through compulsory standards and technical regulations at the ports of entry, warehouses, and the marketplace. Dr. Richards has extensive experience in food science and biotechnology, quality management systems, and standards development. So over to the virtual podium for Dr. Wendell Richards. Is he on? Dr. Richards,
hi.
are you there?
Okay, yes. Hi, morning. Yeah, I'm going to have to make a bit of a change. Presentation is not coming up on the laptop,
Okay.
so I'm going to switch to my desktop. Okay.
Okay. But Dr. Richards, we are not hearing you if you are speaking.
Okay, so good morning all. Sorry for that break in transmission. So what I'm going to take you through is the labeling requirements for the standard that we'll be regulating here in Jamaica. So good morning again to all stakeholders in Jamaica and the stakeholders in Trinidad and Tobago and my colleagues at TTBS. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, the National Compliance and Regulatory Authority is formally the regulatory division of the Bureau of Standards in Jamaica. So NCRA will now be a standalone entity where we will be regulating and enforcing the standards, right? Where BSJ will be developing standards, doing testing and development of industry. So what we're going to be looking at, we'll be looking at this morning is the labeling requirements of the JSCRS 58, which is a CARICOM standard adopted by Jamaica, JSCRS 58. We'll be looking at a national procedure, which involves registration, contacting TTBS, making payments for testing, shipping samples to TTBS, receiving test reports and sending to the manufacturer, and enforcement. Okay, so the energy label. The energy label shall contain the following elements. So this is the packaging. We're looking now at the packaging of the your CFL packaging or your LED packaging. The energy label shall contain the following elements: the rated wattage, the efficacy, light output in lumens, and the rated life in terms of hours. The energy label may contain the following elements: the estimated daily energy use based on 3 hours per day, and the beam angle. So with respect to the rated wattage, efficacy, light output, and rated life, this must be on the label, right? It is optional. You may, in terms of the estimated daily energy use and the beam angle, right? For the LED integrated light bulbs. So CFL and LED shall contain the following additional labeling requirements, which may be located on the product itself or packaging. Mark of the manufacturer, the country of origin, rated voltage, light color, color temperature in terms of kelvins, the color rendering index, the cap type, and the frequency. So the cap type is basically of 2 types, whether there's a bayonet type and then there's also a screw type. Okay, so you need to state that on the label as well. The language and location. The labeling information shall be expressed in English, right? The label shall be affixed or printed on any of the external faces of the individual packaging of the lamps. The label shall not be obscured by anything that is in place, printed or adhered to the external part of each package of the lamp, which prevents or reduces the visibility of the label, right? So in other words, the critical information should not be obscured to the consumer. In terms of permanence, the label shall remain on the packaging at least until the product has been purchased by the final consumer. Now, you would have heard Mr. Dudnat Singh say that they would have tested some samples from Jamaica. So based on the results that we got in terms of labeling, these were some of the specifications that did not meet the specifications of the standard. The efficacy, the luminous flux, the light color, the color rendering index, the indication of dimmability, indication of whether LEDs are related for use in an enclosure. All these specifications failed. So we submitted a small sample of LEDs and CFLs. And typically, these were the specifications of the labeling aspect of the standard, which failed. Okay, so these are things you're going to have to look out for and indicate to the manufacturers. Now, in terms of the national procedure, it is recommended that you apply for registration via https://360.ncra.org.jm, right? As an importer, manufacturer, distributor of products by compulsory standards of commodities, which are governed by compulsory standards, you should be registered with the NCRA. So we would advise you to go to this website and get registered. NCR will review the application. NCR will first contact the regional testing facility, TTBS, via email with details of samples to be submitted for energy efficiency testing. In other words, you, the manufacturers, would contact us with the intention, or your importers or distributors would contact us explaining that you have an intention to put these products on the market. Okay, so we're going to guide you through the system. So first, you start off by registering. We review the application. We will inform TTBS that there are samples to be sent for testing via email with details of the samples to be submitted for energy efficiency testing. Samples can be those for monitoring purposes by NCRA or those submitted on behalf of distributors or importers. The TTBS will respond via email to NCRA with a request for quotation form. Okay, so there's a lot of documentation involved when you're sending the samples for testing. We are going to help you through managing that process. Okay, then as the importers, distributors, we're going to help you through that process. So TTBS will respond via email to NCRA with a request for quotation form to be filled by the NCRA with the relevant information. This form is returned via email to TTBS contact personnel for processing. Subsequent to the receipt of the request for quotation, the TTBS will provide via email the laboratory service order contract, which will include the item information, the cost for testing, and turnaround time. The LSOC shall be confirmed by NCRA with the information provided for approval. Once approved, the LSOC shall be signed and the company stamp placed in the area sign along with the payment information. This document shall be returned via email for processing. All payments shall be made via USD dollars, USD, United States dollars, and the wire transfer information to TTBS's US dollar account. Right, so this information will be provided to NCRA, and we will provide this to you, the importers and distributors. All items submitted for testing shall be in their respective packaging, as this information on both packaging and item is critical for analysis and evaluation of results. Reporting of results will be issued 2 working days after the completion of testing. Instances where the samples were submitted by a distributor or importer for regulatory purposes, NCRA shall also be copied on the results. Okay, so we will be copied on the results so we can advise you and explain the results to you, whether the results are compliant with the JSCRS 58 or not. So let me just back up here a bit. So we are encouraging you to dialogue with us. Okay, we went through this process with respect to the energy efficiency of the refrigerators and the freezers and air conditioners, and it was really a smooth process. We had some hiccups along the way, but it was really we didn't have much difficulties because there was a lot of dialogue and communication between the manufacturers and NCRA. Okay, so we're asking you to keep the dialogue open and inform us when you want to put anything on the market and come through NCRA rather than just putting the product on the market. Okay, so enforcement. Before we get enforcement, we usually have stakeholder consultations like what we're having now. Okay, so we usually give you time to comply with the standard. In this case, this is JSCRS 58. We would give you time to comply, get familiar with the national procedure and the regulations. And usually we set a date for commencement of enforcement. Usually you, the stakeholders, would advise us as to how long you want. Typically, it's usually 6 months. Okay, from the date of consultation, we start enforcing after 6 months. So we give you 6 months to inform the manufacturers what are the specifications, what are the regulations, what are the procedures, so you get familiar with it, and we start enforcing after that date, after typically about 6 months. So enforcement. What gives us that right to enforce is the Standards of Act 68, Standards Regulations 1983, Standards Amendment Regulations 1999, the Customs Prohibition of Importation Order 1991, and the NCRA Act of 2024. Right, so this NCRA is pretty new, which was passed on January 15, 2024. So, enforcement actions for non-compliance. Standards Regulations of 1999 empowers the inspectors to withdraw, detain, condemn, seize, destroy. All right, so we would rather not go this route, right? We'd rather that you dialogue with us, communicate with us, so we can explain the procedures and make sure that the bulbs are compliant. Now, we will be monitoring the marketplace. As you know, in Jamaica, we monitor the ports of entry, we monitor the marketplace. Okay? Looking for the bulbs, looking at the labeling, submitting samples for testing. So I want to sort of encourage you again, because there's going to be a bit of a logistical, we're going to have some logistical, I don't want to say complications, but the logistics is going to be a bit different, because we're going to have to be submitting samples to TTBS for testing. So we want you to be on point, okay? We want you to dialogue with us, comment with us, so we can advise you with the proper procedures. Because simple things like you have to fill out the forms, send it back to TTBS. TTBS is going to inform you of the cost. You have to wire the funds to TTBS, right? The importers and distributors, you will be responsible for paying for the testing as well as the shipping. Okay, so let me just back up to some of the points raised in the national procedure. You will be responsible for submitting. I may have missed out a slide here. All right, you will be responsible for submitting. We will guide you through the process, but you will be responsible for the payment of the testing as well as shipping of the samples to TTBS. Now, we had a trial run last year. I think it was between October and November. Okay, we had a little hiccups because we were doing it for the first time, right? But that's why we did it, so that you guys would make the same mistakes, right? A simple thing like getting the cost of the samples, right? So even though you're sending samples, inform the brokers in Trinidad, the cost of the samples. So we didn't send our cost, and that caused a delay between the broker in Trinidad and TTBS. Okay, so we learned from that mistake. So make sure you're sending the cost of the sample. When you're sending the samples, make sure you put that information in there. Label your samples for TTBS testing, right? So you don't have any unnecessary problems with those type of things. So you use the address, TTBS's address. We give you all that information. Label TTBS for samples for TTBS testing. Send the cost of your samples as well. Importantly, Mr. Singh mentioned and no.
Dr. Richards, you may have to repeat what you said just
but
now.
Extra bulbs in case there's any breakage. Okay.
Sorry, Dr. Richards, you said something and we did not hear. Dr. Richards, are you there? Okay, thank you. But we will try to get back to you in the question and answer session for you to go over the advice that you were giving us. Okay, thank you very much. Up next is Mr. Clint Barnes. Mr. Clint Barnes is currently employed as an inspector in the implementation division. He has worked at TTBS for the past 17 years, during which time he has functioned in various units in the division, including the automotive, construction goods, electrical and special projects. Mr. Barnes graduated from the University of the West Indies with a BSc honors in biology. He is an American Society of Quality Certified Quality Inspector. He is also a certified lead auditor for both ISO 45001 2018 and ISO 9001 2015. Mr. Barnes has sat on a number of standard development committees, and he's currently part of the team responsible for implementing the compulsory national standards for CFL and LED bulbs, as well as refrigeration and air conditioning products. The podium is yours, Mr. Barnes.
Okay, good morning, everyone, all in attendance, fellow stakeholders. What I will be going through is the same thing like what Dr. Richards went through before, but from a Trinidad perspective with respect to the surveillance activities and testing that was done locally. So we'll go through the CFL and LED survey that was conducted by the TTBS, the results of the labeling inspections, the results of the laboratory testing, and the conclusions drawn from that. Right, so a survey was conducted from January 2020 to January 2021. It was further updated in 2024, and when the update was done, we saw that the mix of products on the market did not change much, even though some products became more popular, others less popular. Right? The survey was conducted in support of the National Compulsory Standard, the TTCS, 11 of 2021, and that was coordinated by CrossQ and funded by PTB. Right. The areas covered, well, it was the entirety of Trinidad and Tobago, so all counties were covered, and the sister isle was also covered. During this survey, we visited over 220 retailers. 84 brands of bulbs were seen on the market. Of those 84, 24 of those brands made up about 80% of the market, well, over 80% of the market, while 53 brands were seen in less than 3 locations. Samples of the 24 top brands were taken, were purchased, and actually sent for testing at the TTBS. So the results that you're seeing here with respect to the labeling requirements would be on the 24 bulbs, the 24 brands that were taken. Because if we used all the brands, the problem would have been that we had some bulbs where you would just see LED bulbs as a brand and no other labeling. We had all types of other labeling issues with respect to some of the bulbs that were not as popular. If we put the information here, it would have skewed the results a lot to the showing where the minority of bulbs actually had the majority of non-conformances with respect to labeling. Right? So from the 24 brands that were sampled, the rated wattage, we had 100% conformance with respect to labeling, right? And these are the energy labeling requirements. So rated wattage, 100% conformance. Efficacy was 42% conformance. The majority of bulbs did not have the efficacy figure stated, labeled on the bulbs, labeled on the packaging, or the bulbs themselves. The light output in lumens, 96%. I think it was only like one bulb that did not have the lumen figure on the bulb. Rated hours, all the bulbs in that sample actually had the rated hours on the labeling. The mark of manufacturer, which in most cases would be the brand, 100% of the bulbs in the sample were actually will conform to this requirement, while country of origin, only one bulb actually did not have a country of origin. But in the sample of the most popular bulbs, the country of origin was actually China for all, with the exception of the one that did not have the country of origin labeled. Though on the field we saw some bulbs where they were made in the USA and other regions, but those were not in the sample lot that we looked at. With respect to rated voltage, 96% conformity, light color, 71%, and color temperature, 100%. All right, these are additional labeling requirements as well. Right, with respect to the CRI, it was 67%. 1/3 of the bulbs that were sampled did not have the CRI. Cap type, 92%. Frequency, the reason why the frequency would have been highlighted in a different color is because with respect to frequency, in Trinidad and Tobago we operate at 60 Hertz. We saw some of the bulbs on the market that actually came in with 50 Hertz, and we could speak to that later on. Right? indication of dimmability, 100%, and rated for use in enclosure, 100%. But with respect to what we saw on the market, we actually went to a retailer in Aranguez, and they keep complaining that, well, we asked about if they saw any nonconformities, and they keep complaining about one bulb in particular that kept failing. When they did their investigation, they realized that, and it's a very popular brand, that the reason for the failure was that people would taking that bulb, which was not rated for an enclosure, using them in enclosures, and they were only giving 3 to 6 months of life. But when used as manufactured, they lasted years. So these labels do have an impact on the consumer with respect to how the lifespan of the bulbs, right? So you look at the test results. With voltage stabilization, where the voltage has to stabilize within plus or minus 0.2% of the rated voltage, we had 88% conformance. These are the actual lab tests, the results from the lab tests. With respect to power, we actually saw 83% conformance, which would mean that some of the power, the wattage, the rated wattage that we see on the bulbs, on the packaging, actually fell below less than 10% of what the stated rated power was. With respect to efficacy, we've seen 50%. That 50% is not a true indication of the level. The problem is that because some bulbs did not actually have the rated efficacy, it might have been only a pool of 15 to 20 bulbs we were looking at when we did the analysis. So the lab was not able to test a number of bulbs because the information was not there to test the efficacy, right? Luminous flux, you see 74%. We also had the problem with one sample that was that didn't actually have the lumen rating, but a number of them also fell below 10% of what the stated lumen rating was. A number of bulbs actually fell below that, more than 10% below that, which meant that they failed the requirements. And with respect to the CRI, 71%. Some were not stated, but others, especially where CRI usually accept something over 80%, we actually saw some bulbs with 64, 65%. So some of them failed, and they failed by a wide margin, right? So from the surveillance activities and the lab results, what we concluded is that the missing information on the packages, on the packaging, actually had a serious effect on the lab's ability to test some of the parameters, right? We saw on the market some 50 hertz rated bulbs, and while tests were conducted at both 50 and 60 hertz to see the effect on the various parameters, tests like the rated life could not be conducted because to conduct that test, you're looking at putting bulbs for about 8 months. And currently we do have the capacity to treat with all the bulbs and run all the bulbs for 8 months. So we do know the effect, the long-term effect of bulbs operating at 50 hertz. Sorry, bulbs that were manufactured to operate at 50 hertz and operating on a grid, a 60 hertz grid. The long-term effect of the on the life of the bulbs, right? There were also limitations with respect to run-up time tests, where though is not a requirement to put on the packaging, some type of specification sheet, data sheet with respect to the various parameters, such as run-up time, needed to be provided. But because we purchased the samples and submitted them for testing, we did not go to the actual importers or manufacturers, if there are any, to get that data sheet to submit to the lab. So in the future, that is something we'll be doing, right? During the survey, it was noted that some brands actually had false certification marks. False certification marks are a serious thing because they are in breach of the Standards Act, and under the Standards Act, we have the power to make any importer, retailer, wholesaler, manufacturer remove any false certification marks. So it is something that we are looking at, and in the future we will be treating with past, well, obviously the moratorium period will, after the moratorium period. Right, so within the 24 brands that were sampled, only one conformed to both the labeling and testing requirements of the national compulsory standard. So it's something that we'd have to look at, and we'd have to work with the importers and distributors, but my colleague will speak more on the actual enforcement and how we will go about that enforcement going forward. That's it for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Up next is Mr. Clenwood Jones. Clenwood Jones is an Inspector 3, acting in the Implementation Division. He currently leads the Surveillance and Special Projects Unit that administers the market surveillance function at TTBS. The unit is also involved in spearheading the development of conformity assessment schemes for energy efficiency labeling on cooling and lighting products, pepper spray, and the development of a product registry for all items governed by national compulsory standards. Clenwood has been an employee of the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards for more than 20 years, and during this time he has functioned professionally in the areas of conformity assessment as per the enforcement of the national compulsory standards, legal metrology, and health, safety, and environmental management. Mr. Jones is the holder of NEBOSH National Diploma in Occupational Safety and Health, as well as an MSc Distinction Environmental Health and Safety from the University of Sutherland. He's also a trained ISO 9001-2015, ISO 14001-2015, and ISO 45001-2018 lead auditor. Over to you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thomas. Good morning, everybody. Those who are here physically, as well as those who have joined us virtually. Let me join with the others in welcoming you all to this stakeholder event. It's a very critical and important part of our function at the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards with respect to enforcing, let me use the word my director used, ensuring compliance with national compulsory standards of this type. This morning I will take you through some of the enforcement activities, give you an idea of how we intend to ensure that we all work together to comply with the requirements of the standard. I'll speak briefly about the powers of the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards, briefly about the power or the powers of the inspectors. I'll talk about the terms and conditions of inspections in terms of our interactions with persons, companies, entities who, with whom we have to interact to facilitate inspections. I'll speak briefly about the inspection process, and I'll just touch on a few things that would have come during the course of the morning with some of the other presentations. Okay, so with respect to the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards, we are governed principally by two pieces of legislation. The first, the primary one for us would be the Standards Act. We also have in the TTBS legal metrology inspectorate that is governed by the Metrology Act. Metrology, for those of you all who might know, is not about the weather. Metrology is not about Sahara dust and so on, but really is the science of measurement. So, with respect to our mandate under the Standards Act, where there is a reason to believe that goods imported or about to be imported are likely to be a danger to the health or safety of consumers or likely to threaten the environment, whether a standard exists for such goods or not. So in this case, we have a standard, but even if there is no standard in existence, once we hold the view professionally that a good imported into the country may pose harm to the safety and health and welfare of persons in the country, or it may harm the environment, we have the power under the Standards Act to require an importer or vendor to submit such goods for testing, and the goods may only be entered for home use or sold if, in the case of these goods, they satisfy the requirements that we would have set up either by virtue of a standard that we have or some other standard that might exist that might be applicable in the situation. In terms of the powers of the inspector, we're looking at the ability under the Act to prevent the access to the market of goods likely to be a danger to health and safety of consumers. We said that. Or we also have the power to request to enter any place where the inspector has a reasonable ground to believe that an article covered by the Act is manufactured, prepared, stored, or offered for sale, and to examine such articles. Now, for us, generally, when we do inspections, we don't show up generally at an inspector's, at an importer's or distributor's premises and suddenly barge in and demand to see goods. For us, and in our work, we, as the director, executive director would have said, we deal principally, and what we have found is that the majority of persons that we deal with willingly comply with the requirements of standards. So there's a lot of willing compliance. So we have relationships with persons, with businesses, with entities, and based on these good relationships, we have a regime of coming into the business, doing the inspections, and so on and so forth. So it wouldn't be a case of somebody knocking on your door at some unreasonable time and demanding to see goods that you may have stored. Generally, that is not the case, all right? Okay. On the basis of how we operate with respect to willing compliance, the inspections are required to be impartial. The inspection is not a witch hunt. The information that we would get from an inspection, or even information that we get from testing, is confidential. And we try to do the inspection in a timely manner. The aim of the inspection process or the inspection function of the Bureau is not to unnecessarily interrupt the business activities of any organization. In that regard, then there's a requirement for the manufacturer, the importer. Fundamentally, that is to provide a safe place for us to complete the inspection, one that is well lit, easy accessible, without any potential for harm to the inspector, and that all of the documents that we required is available. The documentation usually, in most cases, we'll have beforehand, but in cases where we need to see documentation that you might hold in your position, the aim is that you'd have it available for us to have a look at. All right, to failure to meet the aforementioned terms and conditions for inspection can result. They say will result, can result, in appropriate fines being charged under the Standards Act, Chapter 8203, and its regulations. Now, in terms of the fines and so on, as I said, most of the times, there's willing compliance. So I'm thinking about an occasion where we have to fine somebody. I think that's something very rare. It's not something that usually happens. All right? Okay. Planned inspection, market surveillance activities. Generally, first when we're doing inspections, and with respect specifically to the products that we're speaking to this morning, in the beginning or in the first stages of this process, we will be putting ourselves in a position to sample imports on entry. Items will be released for sale when conformance is achieved to the test requirements. Now, there are a number of ways in which we can do this. Again, as I said, with respect to willing compliance, it's not going to be a case where we hold items at the port of entry and they are not allowed to leave the port unless they comply. Because of the relationships we have with many of you here, the circumstances under which the inspection will be facilitated can vary. So there are circumstances where you'll be allowed to hold the goods at your place of business. Then we'll come to that place and do the inspection and then allow it to be released for sale. And that is a lot of the times the most common way in which we interact with members of the public. With respect to arrangements for sampling, when we do sampling exercises, the sampling arrangements are governed by a standard, ISO 2859-1, which outlines sample procedures for inspection. And it basically allows us to do a sample based on the size of the quantity of the goods being imported, the type of good, whether the good is a high-risk one or not, whether it requires a special sample or not. Those things are not dictated by us necessarily, but we are guided by the relevant standard. The process flow, as I would have outlined just now, is set out in this slide that you're looking at here. The goods are imported. As I said, the items are held for inspection at the importer's premises. We do a visit and we do the label assessment. In the case of the LED bulbs and CFL bulbs, we also have the ability now to do two things. One, if we deem it to be necessary, we can take a sample of the goods or take a sample of the bulbs to have them tested. And as Mr. Singh would have pointed out, the sample size for the testing is 20 items for LED bulbs and 10 for CFL bulbs. So we have that right in law. But there's also another thing that I will speak to in a little while about how we can, based on what we've seen on the field with respect to the percentage conformance rates of the products available on the local market, how we intend to work with that going forward. So the label modification or the label assessment can be done. And if necessary, if we deem it necessary, the item can be, we could take samples, have them tested. Conforming items will be released for sale. Non-conforming items, there is a potential for non-conforming items to be reshipped or destroyed. Now, again, with respect to reshipping and destroying is something that we have done in the past, is something that we do now, but our intention is to work with persons who are importing items into the country to ensure that we don't have to go down that road. All right? We offer services including label assessments. If you have a product that you have intention of importing into the country, you can get into contact with us and send us the label beforehand. We could do a formal label assessment. I think the cost of that is $300 plus VAT. Cheap. Where we'll do an assessment of the label and indicate to you formally whether the label meets the requirements of the standard or not. All right? For items where you have multiple labels, for each of the labels, we do an assessment and let you know, well, okay, this product is fit to come into the market. In addition to the fact that we could do the label assessment formally, obviously we also have the testing capacity, which we spoke to before. All right? I'll speak a little bit in a little while about how we intend to treat with that. All right? Okay, so you heard all about the electrical products lab that we have. And it's the only one of its kind in the country and the only one of its kind in the Caribbean. Right? So we spoke to our colleagues in Jamaica who have joined us for this stakeholder consultation. And the arrangements, so we have a very close working relationship with the NCRA in Jamaica in terms of how goods leave Jamaica to come to Trinidad and vice versa. When we roll out the energy efficiency labeling requirements for some of the other products that we have in mind. You heard also from a number of the presenters about the energy labeling requirements, and those were spelled out. In Trinidad and Tobago, our intention is to develop, or we have developed an outline of what an energy label would look like. Right? The energy labels will include our product certification mark, right? And the information that we deem necessary to be on the label. Now, there is a possibility as well of products coming from outside of the region. Well, most of them come from outside of the region anyway. For persons who are established outside of the region and who have testing support, who have lab support, to also, along with the products, send the lab test reports to us, and we will make a determination after review them whether those are acceptable for entry into the market or not. All right? We will be able to look at the test results, do an evaluation, and make a determination as to whether or not the product can come into the market. The implementation division's mandate, well, we spoke to them already. There's nothing new there. We want to ensure value for money purchases. We want to ensure the minimum label requirements are there to empower the consumer. Critical with respect to consumer empowerment in this regard. As we know in Trinidad and Tobago, when people go to buy light bulbs, how do we buy light bulbs? Anybody? Price is critical. How much what? What my neighbor using? Right? But usually somebody will go and they say they want a 60-watt bulb, a 75-watt bulb, a 100-watt bulb. Right? All right, I want 2 bulbs outside, I want 200 watt, because that is how we buy bulbs. But because of the fact that we have these new products, CFLs and LEDs, I don't know, I haven't seen, I'm not saying that they do exist, I haven't seen a 60-watt LED bulb, or a 75-watt LED bulb, or a 100-watt LED bulb. I haven't seen those for use in homes. What we would see is an equivalence on most of the packages. So it might be a 9-watt, 12, some 6, 7, it depends. And it will tell you on the package what the equivalence is. So somebody coming to buy, that's important consumer information. Because I accustomed buying a 100-watt bulb. And when I come in, if I see 12-watt, well, I wouldn't know what to make any sense of that. So there's certain critical information that must be on the package that empowers consumers. And that is one of them. With respect to the energy label and the energy labeling requirements, as we speak, in Trinidad and Tobago, electricity rates are very low. I mean, we have to admit that we have some people from Jamaica here with us, and they would tell you of what they pay for electricity there compared to what we pay here. So energy is relatively cheap in Trinidad and Tobago, relatively. But we still have bad habits. People leaving lights on. Like I sometimes do that when I get home in the afternoon, the light was on all day, all night, all day. Well, I have LEDs now, so I don't really feel it that much. But if at any point in time, electricity rates in Trinidad and Tobago were to go up, if at any point in time, without any reference to anything happening in the public domain now, then those things become critical and those things become important, and it's going to be critical for us from the TTBS standpoint, as well as for all of our stakeholders to ensure that the packaging or the labeling of the CFL and the LED bulbs could provide some guidance to persons who have to use them with respect to effective use. All right, in closing, as I make way for the manager of the division, I want to talk about testing. We spoke about testing. Now, when we did these surveys throughout the country, what we discovered was that in Trinidad and Tobago, there are 2 sets of persons who would be in this room. There are those who import established lighting product brands. Could call a few, but I guess we all know them. But there are also people in here who would have developed or who have specifications for the product that they communicate to a factory in China, and the factory in China manufactures the product, labels it, brands it for you, and sends it into Trinidad and Tobago. So we have those 2 types of, in the main, that's what we have in Trinidad and Tobago. Fundamentally, everybody's coming out of China, either through the established brands or through local brands, what I'm calling local brands, as I've described. And when we did this survey, a lot of people who are importing the products into the country have to take the word of the Chinese factory or manufacturer with respect to the performance of the product. And what we've seen from the sample that we have tested is that that is not always the case. I'm not casting aspersions on anybody, but sometimes performance standards are declared on the product, in the label or on the packaging, and it's not supported, or we can't validate it when we test it. And we found that because of all the samples we've tested, there was one product. And to me, that was a big surprise. We won't tell you what the product was, obviously, we can't tell you the brand, but it's not anything that anybody here would have expected. One product that met all of the labeling requirements and all of the performance requirements that we could test. So the benefits of the test and the benefits of using the lab include the fact that for the persons who have to import the product or who send specifications to Chinese manufacturers to produce the product for them, that there's an element of quality control. Right? Because a lot of the importers, distributors, retailers don't have they won't have a testing lab. They depend on somebody else. So it's a way that you could ensure that when the product is sent, that, listen, these are the specifications or the minimum performance requirements in the standard. It has come to Trinidad. Our lab, as Mr. Singh said, is an accredited lab. That means that the results are respected globally, because the lab has been accredited by an independent third party. So you have that benefit. The other benefit that you'd have using the testing facility at the TTBS is that once the products have been found to meet the requirements, in Trinidad and Tobago, they'll go onto a regional database. In the lab, we could also test the products using or inputting into the lab test the conditions that exist in other Caribbean countries. So where there are countries that work in 50 hertz, we could do that, test here, and tell them, listen, these products have been tested in the accredited lab in Trinidad and Tobago. Based on your environmental conditions, they have met the minimum performance standards, and so they are acceptable for import or export from Trinidad or import into your country. So there are a lot of benefits. Let me close. This is my second close. All right, this is the final close. Let me close by saying this. So there are a number of people in here whose products we would have tested. As I said, the results based on the brands are confidential. So what we would advise, you could get in contact with us, you could speak to us afterwards to make a determination as to whether or not your brand was one that we tested, or leave your contact information with us. And if that is the case, we'll call you in and ask you to come back into the TTBS, where we would share the test results from your brand with you. All right? The advice from us then would be for you to be in contact with your manufacturer, with your contact, the factory in China, whoever is giving you the stuff, and to indicate what has happened, and we begin a process of trying to ensure that going forward, that when the product comes into the country, it meets the minimum requirements. Thank you very much for your attention, everybody. Questions will follow. Where's Ms. Thomas? She's right here. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Okay, up next is Mr. Gerard Maxwell. Mr. Maxwell is the head of the Implementation Division. He possesses a BSc degree from the University of the West Indies and an MBA from the Arthur Lockjack Global School of Business. He has been in the Bureau for more than 25 years in the Implementation Division and has worked in every unit. Mr. Maxwell represents the Bureau in many facets related to standards enforcement and quality, with one of the most recent and dynamic being a committee co-convener for the ISO, that is the International Organization for Standardization, and the IEC, that is the International Electrotechnical Commission 17020 Working Group 31. Now the ISO IEC 17020 is an international standard that sets out requirements for various bodies performing inspection. So over to you, Mr. Maxwell, to speak on the enforcement regime of the standard.
Okay. A very good morning to you, our very valuable stakeholders. It's always a pleasure to have this opportunity to speak with you all, especially with respect to the rollout of a new standard. My job is usually, I think, the easiest of all presenters, where I would normally speak to the moratorium period that the TTBS will be giving the sector, by which all of the products that enter after that moratorium period will have to meet the requirements of the new compulsory national standard. But before I go there, the good thing about it, again, Mr. Jones would have highlighted what are some of our expectations as they relate to this particular product. The TTBS is very cognizant that this is a new standard, it's a new set of requirements, so we understand the manufacturers and the importers and distributors will require some time to bring your products into compliance, to speak with your suppliers wherever they might be, so that your products will be in alignment with the new compulsory national standard. So all of those would have been some of the factors that we took into consideration. But as Mr. Jones would have said earlier on, what is of critical importance to the TTBS is that we have to work and collaborate with the sector, right? So this is not idle talk or pretty talk for the podium. We really and truly want to take the time to work with you all to ensure that when the moratorium comes to an end, that all of the products that enter into Trinidad and Tobago as they relate to CFLs and LEDs, they meet the requirements of the compulsory national standard, and also to ensure the local manufacturer or manufacturers, they have all of the information and they would have done everything possible to ensure that their products meet the requirements of the standard, right? So, as Mr. Jones would have said, we offer product and label verification. So we are able to basically tell you all, okay, this is what's supposed to be on the labeling. But also, for this particular product, we are looking at a mandatory product licensing program where, as Mr. Jones would have shown, certain key pieces of information must be stated on the label, along with the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards product certification mark or product licensing mark, and also from the regional standards body, CROSQ. So those will be some of the features that we're talking about. But for us to reach the stage of the label, we have to ensure that the product in itself meets certain basic requirements. And again, that speaks to getting the product and having the product tested, making sure the specifications that we're importing to or we're manufacturing to is best emphasized in terms of the performance, right? So our expectation, and it's twofold, you all will subject your product to the required testing, so you all will understand what the performance is, right? That is one. And then also two, as Mr. Jones would have done, he would have given you all an invitation to come in and speak with us. We will also make an effort to reach out to you all to ensure that these might be the deficiencies with respect to the product, and if based on these deficiencies, you all will know how to go about correct it to ensure that it meets the requirements of the standard. And why I want to speak to that again, and my colleagues will share the experience, almost on a, I don't want to say a daily basis, but at least on a weekly basis, we always have some importer coming into the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards, basically speaking that, my goodness, my product doesn't meet the requirements of the national standard. And the product, and all of you will be aware of it, the product has to remain at the port. And when the product remains at the port, the huge costs with respect to demurrage and rent, you all know about that. A container that doesn't meet the requirements of the national standard, some containers might remain a month, 2 months, 6 months. I don't have to tell you all how expensive that is. And all of those fees are in US dollars. US dollars that could be much better spent on acquiring a conforming product to go onto the market, to sell, to come back, reinvest into your businesses, and import more. But then what it's going to do is going down the drain into the coffers of a shipping company that doesn't want to hear that the item doesn't meet the requirements of the standard. We hear it. I hear it almost weekly. And then the importers, they get frustrated. And then the pre-action protocol letters start to fly back and forth. But that is why we have these meetings. Because when we have this meeting and we lay out all of the things that we're prepared to do, then if it has to be escalated, they would say that the TTBS was more than reasonable, right? So I don't want us to arrive at a situation where the TTBS and any one of your companies will have to end up going down that path. So that's why I am not begging, but asking you all, let us work together so that we could ensure that at the end of the moratorium period, all of the products meet the requirements of the standard. Because it's painful. I could tell you all that. You all will probably see straight faces in the meetings. But we know that these things have tremendous costs to your respective organizations. So let us not go down that path. And with that, we're trying to give the most possible generous moratorium period. So we are looking at slightly over 100 days. So this national compulsory standard, we will start to enforce it on Tuesday, the 1st of October, 2024. Right? Tuesday, the 1st of October, 2024. And a long moratorium period like that is to ensure that you all come in, right? So that's well over 5 months. That is somewhere in the vicinity of 5.5 months. So you all have sufficient time from day 1 or day 2 to come in and speak to us and let us work on if there are any deficiencies with your respective products that we can have it addressed, right? It generally takes about a month from China. It might have back orders probably for 2 or 3 months where you might have to wait in a queue to have your items manufactured. But I think with a time period like that, I think is more than sufficient for us to address that. I think it's also more than sufficient to ensure that any stock that you all currently have that doesn't meet the requirements of the standard, that will be absorbed into the marketplace, right? So, again, I want to repeat it. Tuesday, the 1st of October, 2024 is when the moratorium will come to an end. But I know all your Trinidadians and I know all you well because I am one. I'm not like the executive director who's a Belizean. Trini love last minute, right? I'm begging all you also. This is what I'll beg you all for. Let's not do this last minute. So come September, right, mid-September, you all come off of the August vacation with your children, so you feel okay, we have a month to go. As I say, I know all you well. I'm one. So don't come here September to hope that we could work a miracle in a month's time. 1 month will not be sufficient time to address some of the issues that we have seen in the reports that Mr. Jones will have spoken to. So let's try and see if we can, as I say, beat the iron while it's hot, so we can get all of the things that we need addressed, so that come into October 1 moving forward, we have no problems in the market with respect to CFL and LED bulbs. And again, I think all of you all are anticipating, we're all anticipating that there would be some changes in the rates for electricity, and people will be looking at all the various ways that they can possibly cut costs. And as a user of LED bulbs, once you have good LED bulbs, you know their life expectancies. They're very long. That's the first thing. And also the second thing, you see immediate benefits with respect to your light bills once you shift to LEDs, right? So it wouldn't be, you know, if we decide to do away with the dryer, right? So they're not that dramatic, right? So you kick your dryer out for this dry season, and we go out on the lines, you know, you'll see big savings. But LEDs are a little more on the incremental side, but you see the impact. So I think you all in this sector, you all will see the uptake once electricity rates go up. People will naturally flock more towards the LED bulbs because they want to realize the savings, right? So with that, I want to thank each and every one of you all for taking this very precious time out of your various work business time to come and spend with us, and we will open the floor up. So the chairperson of today's proceedings, she will lead us through that. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. Well, we do have persons in the online environment, so we ask that they put their questions in the chat, but please include not only your name, but the company that you represent. If you have any questions, we have two runners in the audience. You lift your hands and they will come to you. When you are asking the question, please say your name and the company you represent. So this is, I'm seeing a few hands right now. I'm sorry, you're just kidding. There's a gentleman right here.
Hi, good day. Hi, good day. My name is Joey Timal from Fix Appliance Repairs. Right. Just for I be in a lot of people's homes, so educating them would be necessary for this. Do you, Mr. Maxwell, allude branding for whatever you guys are testing? So everything on the market in terms of CFL and LED bulbs should have the Bureau Standards logo on it, right? And second to that, after you make a visit to a company and they are non-compliant, is there a follow-up procedure to prevent them from trying to get stuff back on the market? Because you remove that stock, but what is there in place so that they do not try a different strategy?
Yes. Okay. Forgive me, but with respect to the second part of your question, if somebody, if you've done inspections and they've found to be non-compliant, and we have, there are a number of things that could happen. Depending on the non-compliance, there are ways that we could bring them into compliance. So sometimes for labeling requirements, if something is missing and they could have fixed it to the package, well, we'll allow the product in. If it's a story where, as I think you're alluding to the fact where the product is non-conforming, to the point where it's irredeemable, as Mr. Maxwell would have said before, and as I would have said, we have options in terms of seizing the products, having the products destroyed and so on, but this is something that rarely happens. In terms of preventing them from coming back onto the market, though, what happens in Trinidad and Tobago, there's a single electronic window, and for most, if not all of the products that are governed by compulsory standards, we will have a view of those products at the point at which they're being imported into the country. So you'll see the import documents. If, for instance, Fix or Fling is the name of your company, very interesting name. If Fix or Fling is bringing products in or has bought products in that are non-conforming, or Fix or Fling is a problem company for us, is a company that we'll keep our eyes on. When we see import documentation come before us for Fix or Fling, there are people who will assess that or examine that. And based on what they see, based on your history, if you're bringing this thing back again, we have options in terms of how we'll treat with that. So it's something that we will know of beforehand. And there are cases now where people have done that. They've bought products onto the market or into the country, and because the products were non-conforming before, they come, we test them, they're still non-conforming, they've had to ship them out. As Mr. Maxwell would have said, there are some people probably now still accruing demurrage on the port. So there are a number of things that could happen. So it's really not something you want to do, because if or when we pick up on it, the person who would pay the price would be you. Right?
Did he answer your first question?
Right. Remind me, what was the first question? Right. Right. Okay. Let me speak to that. Now, what happens is that with respect to, Mr. Maxwell spoke about a product licensing arrangement that we will have. With respect to the energy label that we can affix to the product, right? If, how these things work globally is that there are other accredited labs, there are other organizations that could put a certification mark on the product. My colleague would have spoken about the fact that when we went out into the field, we saw products with false certification marks. UL, well, you all know the marks, right? People just take the marks and put it on the product, and it's false. I could call a few names, but obviously not in this forum. And those products will be subject to sanction. But if the product has an authentic mark, and in a lot of cases where the products are supported by independent third-party accredited lab test reports, the program is designed in such a way that those can be accepted, right, into the country. But for a lot of our retailers, a lot of our distributors, the effective support will come from the lab that we have here, right? So that once it comes here, it's tested here, it's certified here, and we put the mark from the TTBS here, that is as good as gold coming into the country. Obviously, if you get that, even though you get that, it will be subject to sampling, it will be subject to testing, surveillance, and so on, right? So it won't just be a case of just getting a blanket pass.
Okay, we have an online question.
Just one other thing. Stakeholders, something that Mr. Jones would have spoken about. Sometimes some of these manufacturers, they will just put on any type of mark on your product. And that is a very, very dangerous practice, because when we receive, let me give you a little background with respect to what we do. When we receive the product, what we do is that we first look at the labeling, then we look at the product certification marks that are on it already. So you might see something from UL, CSA, ETA, NOM, all of the product certifying organizations out there. So once we receive that, the first thing that we do is that we go to verify the authenticity
of the mark that is already on the product. So once the mark is an authentic mark, then we continue moving along the process. If we see that the mark on the product is a counterfeit mark, then it sends the whole process into a next direction. Because what happens is that most, if not all, of the certifying bodies, they very, very rigorously and robustly defend their certification marks that are on their product. Trinidad and Tobago has some very, very strong intellectual property legislation, right? So it is also an offense to just duplicate these marks. And again, what happens is that the importer will be none the wiser. They buy these products, it comes onto the market, and then automatically you realize now that instead of running afoul of one law, which is the Standards Act, you see yourself running afoul now of the intellectual property mark legislation, and hefty fines, and again, these things start to take on a legal nature. So we want you all to be very, very, very careful to ensure that not only the respective product certification marks are on the product, but you all bring the products to us to verify also the authenticity of the marks. So you all will not be getting a 6 for 9. We see it happening all of the time. The importers innocently go and buy. And again, I know all your Trinis well. I think that'll be the theme of this meeting for me. I know all your Trinis well. We think that Trinidadians are the most savvy business persons out there. No, you all are babes compared to those people outside there. And I think you all know that when you all start to deal with some of these companies. They will sell you snake oil, right? They will sell you snake oil. And in many instances, you all are none the wiser. It's not until the products arrive here, then you all realize all of the other issues that are associated with them, right? So that is why you all have a Bureau of Standards here, and you have other agencies, but you all have the Bureau of Standards to work for you all to ensure that the products you all bring in meet the requirements of the national standard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. There is an online question. I just need someone.
So we have a few questions online from Anne Brown Chang, custom broker from Jamaica. So it's costly, there's a costly venue to ship from Jamaica to Trinidad to test the bulbs. So the question is, can the brand that are tested by one company, does that same brand have to be tested again?
Mr. Jones.
Right. So thanks for that question from Jamaica. We would have spoken about the regional database. So if there's a brand in Jamaica, and the persons from Jamaica, or the importer is in Jamaica, or the retailer, distributor, manufacturer is in Jamaica, and the brand also is in Trinidad and Tobago, so a popular, well-known international brand, or even some of the local brands that are shipped abroad. Once it's tested at our energy efficiency lab in Trinidad and Tobago, if we know it's for the Jamaican market, if that is indicated to us, it will be tested as per the Jamaican conditions. And the test results, once the product meets the minimum requirements, will be set up or posted onto a regional database that we've set up. the regional database is meant to treat with issues like this. Because we have two centers of excellence for testing in the Caribbean, one in Jamaica, but that's really for refrigerators, air conditioning units, and freezers, and so on. And then the one in Trinidad and Tobago is for light bulbs. If the product is in this market, a sample is bought here, we test it according to Jamaican requirements, and it meets the requirements. It goes onto a regional database, and because of the relationship we have with the NCRA in Jamaica, Bureau of Standards Jamaica, we make that connection so that the product can be sold in Jamaica based on the testing done here.
Okay, thanks. We have another question.
So the second question is from Tara Manik, Engineering and Clean Technology Limited. What is the process to get the information regarding the compliance of the bulbs that we distribute which are tested? Is it based on an appointment or just walk-in?
Mr. Dudnot.
Hello. Right, so based on that question, so it could be on two ways, well, not really two ways, but not on appointment, but once you email the laboratory, the information can be provided, or we could set up to meet in person, and we could have that discussion based on the requirements and the testing results.
The third question is from Jonathan Platt from BNSI. Will you establish a database for appliances that have already been tested with the results, therefore, to assist with stakeholders?
That could be either Mr. Jones or Mr. Singh.
Could you repeat that question, Candy? BNSI, I think, though, is the Bajan.
Will you establish a database of appliances that have already been tested with the results there to assist stakeholders? So they want to know if will that database be available for stakeholders for products already tested?
Okay, so based on the regional database, so the regional database was set up for appliances in terms of the CFS and LEDs, refrigerators, ACs, wine chillers. So in terms of the information that would be uploaded is once testing has done between the two centers of excellence, between Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica, once the item has been deemed compliant to the national standards or the CARICOM standard, then those results will be posted on the regional database.
Okay, we have one more online question.
Dr. Richards has raised his hand,
okay.
So I guess he wants to comment.
No problem.
Yeah, all right, thanks. All right, I have a comment and a question. I have a question for Dudnath. In terms of if we receive like accredited test results, okay, normally what I would do a review of the quality certificates, inspection certificates, and the results before I send it off to the lab. So in this case, if I receive accredited test results for the bulbs and I send it to you, what is the cost to the importer or the distributor? I think that would be important information to give them.
Right, so at this point, we are still working out the logistics in terms of that aspect of the accredited reports for us to verify or validate with regards to the international IEC standard. So we are currently working on that aspect. So hopefully by next week, we should have a course in terms of how we're going to validate those accredited test results according to the international standards.
Okay, and another thing, well, I got disconnected while I was doing my presentation. One of the things I want the importers to know is that if the bulbs are compliant, we would give you what we have called a pre-shipment authorization certificate to bring a commercial shipment. However, if the bulbs are non-compliant, you will have to send that information to the manufacturer to make the necessary changes, and you will have to resubmit the bulbs. Okay, so you're going to have to coordinate. One of the things I want to stress is the coordination and how you do this. So you don't have to meet unnecessary expenses. So you're going to have to plan. So importers are really going to have to plan their business as well. If you intend to put products in a market within a particular time, you're going to have to submit it, right, in a particular time because there could be non-compliance, okay? And the manufacturers will have to make those changes. What we are going to do initially, we're not going to be putting stickers on the packaging like we're doing for the refrigerators and the freezers, okay? What they're going to have to do is make the changes and have the necessary specifications that are supposed to be on the packaging, okay? And then you're going to have to resubmit it. So once there's a non-conformance, you're going to have to make the changes, communicate with the manufacturer, and then they're going to communicate with us. The thing though with the refrigerator program is that we were dealing directly with the manufacturers. And that is what made that program successful. We were dealing directly. I know the Chinese operate completely differently and they don't really want to talk to you and that type of thing. So the brokers, not the brokers, well, the custom brokers, the importers, distributors, you're going to have to be on point with respect to getting the samples to TTBS. We're getting the results. If there's any non-conformance, you're going to have to communicate with the manufacturer to make the changes and resubmit. So you could have a case where the product is meeting the standards, the product specifications meeting the standards, but there are labeling issues. If there are labeling issues, well, you wouldn't necessarily have to submit it. We will communicate that to you once you make the changes. But if it's in terms of the product specifications, you have not met the product specifications, you're going to have to resubmit for testing, okay? So let's try and get it, coordinate well and be on point so you don't meet any unnecessary expenses. And another thing too, and this is for the TTBS team, we are going to have to make that database accessible to the distributors and stuff so they can log on, all right? Because there are different, what do you call it? There are different levels. There are different levels in that database where the stakeholders can log on and see the information. So there's information for the regulators and information for the importers. So we're going to have to make it available to them so they can log on and check and see what was tested already. All right, yeah.
So thank you, Dr. Richards. Any more questions?
We have one more online question. This is from Kimberly Ali-Bokas from the TNT Chamber. What will the TTBS be doing to prohibit the trade and illicit products under this category?
Mr. Maxwell?
Yes. As Mr. Jones said, and I will re-emphasize, after the moratorium period, no light bulb, CFL or LED that doesn't meet the requirements of the national compulsory standard will be allowed on the market. Now, with one caveat, of course, if the non-conformance can be addressed via a change to the labeling, then yes. But once changes cannot be remedied via labeling, those products will not be able to enter onto the local market. So those are the systems that we are going to put in place. As, again, what Mr. Jones said, the TTBS has complete line of sight of all products that will be entering into the country that fall under the category of CFLs and LEDs. So we know what's coming into the country, right? So from there, we will do our initial assessment, and we will do our initial inspections. Of course, from time to time, no system is perfect. So we might, there might be some evasion, but once we find it on the local market and through our market surveillance program, again, what Mr. Jones said, we have all the mechanisms in place where the first port of call will be to ensure, yes, it doesn't conform. If it doesn't conform, can adjustments to the labeling be done? Yes. If yes, we will give the importer and the distributor a sufficient amount of time within which to correct the non-conformance. If the item cannot be corrected, then the Bureau will take the next step to have the item seized. If we go the route of seizure, then you also have costs associated with disposal. If products would have gone onto the market and they would have been distributed on the market, then the TTBS with the importer will work on product recall, where those said products that have already been distributed, they will be recalled, right? So we have various mechanisms by which we can address non-conforming items going out onto the market. But again, as I said, those things are, it creates a hassle. It's very, very time consuming. And again, it is unnecessary costs to the importer, to the distributor, and also to the local manufacturer. So that is why we suggest we try to do it right the first time. I'm sure by now you'll realize I like a sort of adage. So a good tailor or a good seamstress, measure once, measure twice, measure a third time, and then cut. You just can't cut and expect, if it gone off key, to be able, well, you could patch it here or there, right? So that's it, we're familiar with all of these things. So the things that we grew up with, the sayings, is the same thing that pertains to the business, right? So we don't want, as Mr. Jones said, to go down that particular path. Okay, so I hope I was able to address the question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have this gentleman here.
Hi, my name is Dayashakar Maharaj, Modern Electrical Supplies Limited. So Mr. Maxwell, you basically spoke of exactly where I was coming from as well too. I just want to clarify something. The products that would be lingering in our market now, I know you all would be doing surveys and you would see products there. Those lingering products that were there from the moratorium period, would those be requested to recall as well too, or would they stay on the market?
No, normally what we will do, and that will be coming closer to the end of the moratorium, we will have another meeting with all of you all. We'll try to reach out to persons who are not online or the persons who are present to come in and give us an indication of the inventory you all have. So what we will do, we will look at your current inventory coming towards the end of the moratorium. We will examine your discharge rate of your inventory. We'll also look at the items that you all have on sea that are being shipped in, and we will come up with a feasible determination with respect to what will be the expected time that you all have all of these products off of the market. So there will be a little gap. This thing is not a clean and clear-cut thing. So there will be lingering product, but we must be able to identify and understand why, say, CFL X is still on the market. So we will do that determination coming close to the end of the moratorium.
All right. Thank you very much.
Great.
Hi, good morning. My name is Edme Baird from Glen International. I just wanted to know if there's a clear definition in the standard for what the LED bulb or lamp is. Does it consist also of mogul-based type LED bulbs, LED lamps, or different types of LEDs, because there are a range of LEDs. Also, I just want to ask too if when you test the bulb and it conforms, whether there's a unique number attached to it and whether there's a database that, I think Mr. Maxwell is alluding to that, whether a customer could check to see what bulbs or lamps meet the standard with a particular unique code, similar to what UL does.
Hi, good day. So for the first part of your question, you wondered the type of LED covered. So this standard covers the integrated light emitting diode, LEDI, for stable operations intended for domestic or similar general lighting purposes, having a rated power under 60 or rated voltage between 50 and 250 volts. So it applies to all of the LEDs that fall under that integrated LED type. So it's a self-contained appliance, and it covers all of those from the light bulbs to the light bulbs with the individual LEDs attached inside of it. And so that's what's covered under this standard in terms of the LEDs referred to. For the other part of the question.
Yes. In terms of a product registry, ultimately we are working on a product registry not only for LED bulbs and CFL bulbs, but for many of the products, refrigerant gas, air conditioning units, refrigerators, the whole host of products that ultimately our customers and stakeholders and the wider population, they will be able to access this database. At this point in time, the database that is going to be developed for national application, we're a little way off from that. But there is going to be a regional database where importers, distributors, manufacturers, they will be able to log in. But in terms of the database on a national level, we are still currently at this point in discussions with some of our partner agencies and some other companies in terms of developing a database across all products. So somebody might want to buy tires for their vehicle, and they will be able to go into that database in the future and see if these particular tires meet the requirements of the national compulsory standard. You might want to go and purchase a fan, and you can go into the database and you could look for that. So it is coming, but it is still at the developmental stage. So I think we might probably be, to be safe, possibly a year off from that, but still don't hold me to it. But it's something that we're actively working on. Thank you.
We have an online question.
This question is from Carson Rollins. How will the products with full certification declarations be dealt with so that they cannot re-enter the market?
As we said earlier on, we continuously watch all imports that fall under the mandate of the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards. So if we discover a particular importer, say Gerard Maxwell and Company Limited, would have brought in LED bulbs that do not meet the requirements of the national standard and has false or counterfeit labeling or illicit labeling, we would have collected the item at the port. We would have, well, the first instance, we would release the product to your premises. Once you release the product to, say, my premises, we will conduct an inspection. When we conduct the inspection, part of the inspection is label verification, and the other part is the performance side. If a determination is made that the products I would have imported into the country has counterfeit labeling, it automatically means that those products are in violation of intellectual property legislation, which means that those products cannot be sold in Trinidad. It is also so stringent, some of the rights holders don't even want the products to be re-exported. They want the products to be destroyed. So if I decide, okay, this is unfair, I'm going to take it to the court. Once I decide to go the route of court, it automatically means because there's an infringement and a clear infringement on intellectual property, we're going to court and say, okay, I'm taking the bureau to court. The rights holder will normally send a representative, and the representative will basically state, hey, here what's happening. This here is my certification mark, and Gerard Maxwell would have imported products in contravention of my intellectual property rights. Believe you me, as they say, is a slam dunk case. My good friend, Mr. Gopichan up there, he will say that that's a slam dunk case. I can't win that. So they take the products from me, they destroy the products. But automatically, because we know that this person would have contravened the Act, the Standards Act, and the Intellectual Properties Act, we will always kind of keep an eye on you just to make sure that this does not reoccur, right? So it's unfortunate, but that is how it is. So we are continuously looking at your supplier. We'll have information on your supplier. So we will see if this particular supplier who would have sold you products that contravene the acts, the both acts, and we will look at who they're supplying outside of Gerard Maxwell. So I'll look and see if they're supplying Mr. Jones, supplying Mr. Dudnat, supplying Mr. Barnes. And again, we will be looking to ensure that that particular brand or that particular type doesn't come in, right? So it's a whole system of enforcement that occurs behind the scenes. So all you will see is that you have your product, your custom clerk and broker, they'll have done the running around, the footwork, and you have the product at your premise so you can start to distribute. But there's a whole ecosystem behind that is working and churning just to ensure that the products that finally come onto the market, they meet the requirements of the national standard. Right? So I hope I was able to answer that question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Maxwell. And in the interest of time, we will have to come to a close. But we do ask if you have any more questions that you can send your questions in an email to any one of the persons on this panel. So I want to say thank you for your participation. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for everything. But to have something like this done, it takes a small army. So I would like to personally thank the members of the Surveillance and Special Projects Unit. That would be in the background, who have been doing a lot of work in the background. That is Ms. Danielle Holder right in the front here. We do have Ms. Alicia Paddy. I would like her to come in. Ms. Rhea Francis. We have Keisha Charles Diamond, Mrs. Diamond, and we also have Ms. Joanne O'Connell. So I would like to say thank you to them. Thank you all, and let us journey towards a brighter, and that's a pun intended, tomorrow. Thank you very much. Someone has dropped their millions of dollars. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 million. Oh, and please, we ask you to fill out the suggestions and comment sheet and leave it at the registration desk.